Hello and welcome to Better Under Pressure. I'm Sarah Milne-Rowe, author of The Shed Method and founder of Coaching Impact. And in this podcast, I talk to leaders from all walks of life about being better under pressure and using pressure for better. I want to explore how we handle pressure in a world that is becoming more and more complex, the impact that pressure has on our ability to perform at our best, and what we do to be better under pressure.
I remember when I got my first CEO job offer and I was like, what, are they crazy? Like, what are they talking about? And I had butterflies. Every time I thought about it, I would get that feeling inside of me of like, oh boy. And I was like, lean into that. When you have butterflies, it means you are about to grow because you're going to be challenged in a way that you haven't been before. I would lean into that feeling of like, I'm going to pretend I'm more confident about this than I really am because I know that there's a really good possibility that I can do it.
Today, I'm talking to Helena Maus, CEO of Archetype, a global communications and marketing agency, and who describes herself as an atypical CEO. Helena is passionate about furthering Archetype's vision to build the model of the agency of the future. She's also passionate about driving Archetype's client charter, in which success is mutual and excellence is pursued relentlessly. Previously, Helena served as CEO at Byte, was partner at the OutCast Agency, and held a number of in-house roles, including Chief of Staff at Yahoo. In our conversation, she shares how small moments of humiliation became the source of conveying her truth, how growing up in a government-assisted social housing experiment impacts the way she leads, and what happened when her husband told her to quit. Helena, can we start with the question of, as we're sort of interrogating pressure, can you remember the first time you felt pressure?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have instances in our lives of pressure. You know, there's an exam, in school that you want to do well on, or, you're in a play and you want to do your very best. And so I think we all have those. And I remember a number of those, but I think the first time I felt pressure that felt more insurmountable was when I started working in Silicon Valley. And it was in the early go-go days. And it was such an exciting ride, but I felt like an outsider. And I felt the need to sort of obfuscate who I really was and where I had come from, and to pretend to be someone else. And I think that was a kind of pressure that I put on myself that felt insurmountable because I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't being my true self. So there was sort of this constant low level pressure. And then you add the pressures of a normal day on top of that. And it was really challenging. But I was in my early 20s, working in Silicon Valley at that time. Wow.
So a few things in there. The first thing is, I'm intrigued to know why you felt you couldn't be yourself. So track back. If we could start there, what gave you the impression that you couldn't be yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think these were the days when it was expected that you were a Stanford graduate. You had this sort of top tier education. You came from a family of means that enabled that opportunity for you. You were much more likely to be male. That I was very often the only woman in the room. But that educational experience, that socioeconomic background was not me. And I sort of felt like I always knew that I couldn't let people know, that I wasn't the same as them. And so I'd sort of nod along. And honestly, I have worked really hard on this, on being much more authentic, and sharing my story with people. But to this day, if you go onto my LinkedIn page, you will see that my education is not listed. And I got, I did very well at university. I graduated top of my class, but I did not go to a prestigious university because I was working in order to put myself through school, and our family didn't have the means for me to go to one of those prestigious top tier private universities.
Yeah. So when you felt that pressure,
Yeah.
as a young woman.
Yes.
How did you recognize that it was something that you needed to manage?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it, I let it build for a long, long time. And recognized that I wasn't able actually to fully be myself and fully do the best work that I could when I was spending so much energy on
Okay.
this other thing, which was like, just keep quiet about this and nod along. And, when people were talking about their experiences getting their Harvard MBA, I'd be like, right. I had no idea what that experience is like. So I don't know. I think the only way that I got out of it was to just stop doing it and to recognize that people would accept me as I was. I remember speaking with someone who worked at Google at the time, who was talking to me about maybe coming to work there. And I was honest with him. And I said, but I don't have the education that Google requires. And just speaking that truth, because at that time you had to go to a prestigious university to be considered for job interviews, and just speaking my truth in that moment. And, I was sweating when I was doing it, but it was like this, release in that moment. And I was like, oh, okay. This is okay. I can do this, because his response was not like, yeah, it's too bad. And he was like, his response is more along the lines of, well, we think that you're exceptional and you should come in. I guess that was sort of the first time I recognized that there was inside of truth, inside of being myself, was the release valve for some of that low level pressure that builds up when you're not being authentic.
Yes. And where are you now on that barometer, would you say?
I would say I'm exactly on the other end of the spectrum. And I try to be very authentic. Well, I don't try to be, I am very authentic in all of my interactions with the people with whom I work. And I think although, as I said earlier, my LinkedIn page, I still haven't updated, and I probably never will. So there's still some part of me that thinks that I will be judged by people who don't know me. But for those people who do know me, I tell my story over and over and over again, because I want other people who may feel the way that I did to be released from that, and to see that they can excel in their life and their career by being who they really are, by sharing their authentic experiences. So I try to model that behavior. And in many ways, my job is more high pressure than it has ever been. There are nearly 700 people who rely on me for their to feed their families, and 400 clients, turning their eyes towards us and saying, help us to be successful. So on the surface, it sounds like I have more pressure than I've ever had, but because I am now authentically myself, it's in some ways almost the easiest job I've ever had. I know that sounds bizarre.
Gosh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but I'm just so much more comfortable than I've ever been before, because I can be authentic.
Yeah. So I what's so useful, I think, in what you've just described there, Helena, is the energy sort of capacity that holding something down takes, that almost feels worse than what you've just described, which is being the CEO of an organization with a growing amount of people, with a growing amount of clients, in possibly, I think, the biggest growth period you've ever had. Absolutely. And it feels a breeze, it sounds like, in comparison with what you've just described.
It's not, not every day is easy, and not every day is without pressure. But I think because I'm free from exactly what you're talking about, which is like this, almost like it's right under the surface, almost invisible to me for most of my career, the pressure that I was putting on myself to fit in, or when so often I was the only woman in the room, to make sure that I was representing in exactly the right way, and and not being bossy, and all of those things that we for so long have been taught as women are the right patterns of behavior, which, if I'm honest, is not really authentically me. I think I'm naturally much more of a leader, and I want to share my ideas. And so, that pressure of like trying to obfuscate my past and where I was from, but also trying to kind of fit into these like social norms, that was truly exhausting, even though, the work part of it was okay. It was, but it used so much energy to try to be these other things. And boy, letting that go. And I want everybody who I know who's coming up in their career to know this. You are going to be more successful. You are going to go further in your career if you are your whole true self every step of the way. And it may feel like maybe I don't fit in and maybe I'm not getting the opportunities that I would otherwise get, but the opportunities that you do get are going to be the right ones for you. And you will be better at your job and happier in your life if you can be your authentic self.
Yeah. And what's the timeline from when you had that conversation with that guy about Google and to where you are now? Just to give a sense of perspective in terms of the journey you've been on with this, Helena, that'd be helpful.
I mean, it was pretty far into my career when I had that conversation, to be honest. I was probably 15 years into my career in tech before that one conversation where I gave myself permission to speak my truth. Which was not, it wasn't like this big confession, you know what I mean? Like I didn't go to a prestigious university, you probably won't be interested in me. Doesn't sound like a big confession, but for me, I was ashamed, and so I admitted something to someone who I didn't really know that well, something that made me feel ashamed. And I was like, well, that wasn't so bad, but it was, I was probably halfway into, past the halfway point, into my career from where I am now, before I did that. And even after that, I still would sort of eke it out here and there. It's really been in the last 3 years where I've said, here is my experience.
Wow.
And because I've had this experience, there's space for you too. And that's actually become a big part of what motivates me in my job and as a person, is helping other people to feel successful by sharing my story and giving them an opportunity to see themselves inside of it. And so really, honestly, that's only been probably in the last 3 years that I'm sharing this story over and over again, or pieces of my experience that I might have otherwise pretended didn't exist.
So yeah, what I love about what you're sharing there is that you have experienced a pressure for quite a long time in this particular, or in this authentic space, or feeling like you can't be in order to be successful in tech.
Yes.
And as you've gone through that, you've slowly released the valve, it sounds. And as you've released the valve, you're getting more energy back. So the pressure that you felt, you've turned into a force that actually now gives you energy back.
Absolutely.
Is that a way of describing it?
I think that's exactly right. And in fact, this is a concept that you really helped me to focus on, which is, the things, the sort of the energy givers and the energy takers, and really focusing on ensuring that those things are in balance. And for me, the biggest energy giver is when I feel that I'm helping someone else to be successful in their career and their life. I am so crystal clear on this now. And so I actually go and seek those opportunities out all day long, in some small way to feel like I'm helping someone else to be successful. And part of the way that I do that is by sharing my story and saying, look, I am an atypical CEO. If you looked at my life story and my background, you would not have expected me to be sitting in this seat.
So come on, tell us about your background, Helena.
Sure. So I had an amazing childhood. I grew up in San Francisco in a sort of social experiment that was a cooperative housing that was very thoughtfully and purposely diverse. And so that was just my reality, that you grow up around people who speak every language, who are straight or gay, raising children, who are single mothers or single fathers. That was my experience, that kind of texture. Those were the families all around me. But we were really poor. We were on government assistance. But I didn't know it. As a child, you don't know. You just know that you feel loved and cared for and happy. But I do remember when I started in school, sort of being teased, had to wear my brother's hand-me-down shoes. I remember the day that I didn't have 10 cents to pay for my reduced price lunch, and they wouldn't give me lunch, and I remember those small, it's funny, those small moments of sort of feeling humiliated really exist still in my mind. I can remember them very clearly. And in fact, that may have led to not may have, I'm sure it did lead to this sort of pretending that I did later on in life became this sort of, how to protect yourself against that sort of judgment and ridicule. But yes, I mean, it was in many ways as a kid, it was an amazing experience, but there was no part of my childhood that would have said, and one day, you're going to work in Silicon Valley and you're going to work with some of the most famous people in the world. And you're going to run a 650, 700 person company. There was no part of my childhood that would have led to that as a result. I never saw a path like that for myself. And because that was not the experience of the adults around me. They worked at nonprofits, or they didn't work, or they worked at restaurants. We had that amazing family that lived across the hall from us who had immigrated to this country, and had left roles as a doctor to become here in this country a bartender. But to me, being a bartender was like just what people's parents did. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think in so many ways, I'm so grateful for that experience, because it taught me what diversity feels like authentically, and how wonderful of an experience that is to grow up in the world around people who have such a vast diversity of experience. But it was hard. The older I got, the more I felt the difference between me and other people, and the less proud I became of where I had come from. But I've certainly gone full circle, and now I'm so proud of it. And I feel so fortunate to have had that experience.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing here is that the pressure, your first experience of pressure, was keeping your background, where you'd come from, quiet. And
that's right.
That's what pressure was for you, was to putting that somewhere and pretending somewhere else.
Well, it was, yes, exactly. And I mean, obviously I'd felt other pressures, right? But in the same way that everyone else has. I think it was the combination of having that kind of constant, low level pretending pressure. Yes. And then you add the sort of day-to-day pressure as you're trying to do very well and striving to be excellent, and putting a lot of pressure on yourself to do well on exams or to do well in a presentation. I think it was like adding the extra on was what was so exhausting. And some of the things that, as I look back, some of the things that I regret the most were when I was trying to make up to the world for the things that I thought that I lacked. I mean, I just never wanted to give people the space to doubt me, or to doubt my commitment to my job. And what a shame that is now in retrospect. I have twins, who are now teenagers and amazing. But I left them at home with a nanny when they were 11 weeks old, because I could not wait to get back to the office, because I wanted,
sorry, that's my dog.
Not a problem.
I'm so sorry, everyone.
Don't be. But I didn't want people to think I was going to be distracted by my children. I wanted them to think that I was this, sort of high performing professional. Yeah. And how now I look back and I'm like, what? How embarrassing.
Yes. Yeah.
And I never talked about my kids when they were little. It was like I almost pretended they didn't exist. Can you imagine? I'm so ashamed of that now, in retrospect. Now, and now that I'm in this position where I believe part of my purpose is to model behavior for other people.
Yes.
If I'm on a call like this, I don't care who I'm with. If my children come up to me to ask me a question, I will stop what I'm doing and turn to them and speak to them. And I think out of respect to them, but also it's modeling behavior for other people to give them permission to be their authentic selves. And I think the pandemic has been very interesting in this regard, because I think for so long, you felt like you could really bifurcate your life. It was like, I have my professional life, and then I have my personal life, and they are two different lives. I mean, how asinine is this idea? It is.
I so agree.
Your life is your life, right? And it's like some part of your life you're at work, and some part of your life you're not at work. But and I think the pandemic, actually, if we can be grateful to it
Yeah.
which sounds bizarre, but if I can be grateful to this experience, it is because that veil has been lifted, right?
Yes.
You're sitting right now inside of my living room with me, and
Yeah.
my mom may totter by in the background.
Yeah.
My daughter
My
is
dog's
downstairs
barking.
yes, your dog is barking. This is our life, and it's
Yeah.
messy and complicated and
Yes.
amazing.
Yes.
And let's be proud of that. So I think that actually it has been another step for me to come to this place of authenticity, and it has been helpful for me, bizarrely. And it does sound strange to say that I'm grateful to this lockdown experience, but in that way I really am, because I think it has in a way forced us all to be more honest about our experience, and given me even more opportunity to model behavior that is about permission giving to other people to live their full life and bring their full self, to work. And if you need to calm the dog, or tend to your mom, then you should do that. That is more important than this meeting that we're in.
Yes. And as you've been doing that, modeling that, Helena, through the pandemic, have you seen concrete examples of people in your company opening up in the same sort of way because of your leadership?
I don't want to take credit for it, but I think as an organization, we really have given ourselves, all of us collectively, permission to be authentic. I have said that word more in this last 22 minutes than ever in my life, but I think that is really the core of it. I think we've created a culture where people can bring their full selves to work. And it's interesting because I think there were a couple of taboos left in the workplace, a couple of areas that we still didn't talk about until a couple of years ago. Even for us, Archetype, where we try to be very open, but we weren't talking about compensation and mental health. Those were things that were still hush hush in a lot of ways, and we have stopped doing that. Okay. Now we talk about mental health very openly, and we provide resources to our staff to make sure that if they're struggling, they know exactly what's available to them. We give people permission to say, do you know what? I'm going to log off today because I'm having a hard one. And, there's a lot of love that is sent towards that person. And it is not a shameful thing. And then the other, sort of the last pin to fall was discussion about compensation. We now publish our salary bands internally. We just shared the updated ones yesterday because we look at them a couple of times a year. We put our compensation numbers in our job descriptions. And I think this for us was sort of the last sort of secret in a lot of ways. And I think it is part of this for me. Let's just be honest with each other and open, because you'll be so much more in your flow if you are that way. So we now talk about compensation very openly, as it was really the last taboo. You didn't ask the person across from you how much they earned, but now you have permission to do that. And we encourage it because it helps to ensure that we are building a more equitable environment, both at Archetype and for people who go on to other places in their career. They've really learned how to have an open conversation about compensation, which for my entire professional life was an absolutely taboo topic. Women never asked for raises, right? Or people of color also were paid less than their white male counterparts. And we're like, this is wrong. And so the only way you're going to write that is through truthfulness and being open and honest. So I guess in some ways, yes, back to your question, which is, have I seen examples of other people being more truthful? But I think it is so embedded now in our culture, this culture of trust and transparency. We have absolutely normalized every aspect of being open and honest inside of our culture. And I am excited for those people who go on in their careers to other places to bring that with them, and to expect that from their employer. It's part of what we're trying to achieve when we say Archetype. We're very they're intentional in our name. We want other companies to do the same. And so that's part of what I'm so excited about. So yes, sort of, just because it's inside of our ethos. And so because it's such an important part of our ethos, I think we need to model it all the time. Transparency.
I'm really hearing that. And thought it stood out for me when you said comfort, of openness, of transparency. Yes. And it feels to me like so far in this conversation, pressure has shown up for you through keeping secrets.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah.
And you've, as a leader of your company, have taken that and said no more secrets. That's because right. For you, that was hugely pressurizing, was holding on to secrets.
Exactly.
So how do you notice pressure turning up for you now or other people in Archetype in that transparency?
Yeah, I think there is in two ways, I think, in two sort of opposite ways. One is at very pressurized moments in time, the thing that we turn to is honesty. And so I think that's sort of the wonderful part of it, right? So when we first went into the pandemic and we didn't understand yet what was happening in the economy and how that was going to impact us, the management team built a plan, a stair-step plan. If this, then this, if this, then this, if this, and then this. Yep. And you know what? We then turned around and we shared that with the staff. This is our plan. This is, if this happens, our response is going to be this. If this happens, our response is going to be this. And I think previously I would have been afraid to share that because I would have been like, well, people are going to be nervous. If they know that we're going to look at, cutbacks that look like ABC, they're going to be afraid. And then the truth is it's uncertainty that makes people afraid. Yeah. Right. Because
what a great point.
Right. When you are in a vacuum of information, by the way, you create a lot of stories about what could happen. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted to be boldly transparent with people, to shift a sense of control back to them so that they understood that this was not something that was happening to them. It was something that we were going through together. So I think in that way, it was really beneficial to be. But on the other side of that is that it's really scary. Yeah. It's really scary because you start to second guess yourself. If you're like, God, should I really be telling everybody this? Yeah. I'm not sure that I should be, and we did that on compensation transparency at first. We knew it was something that we wanted to do. We knew it was the right thing to do in the world, but we were scared, on what response was going to be, because people were going to look at those bands and say, I'm in the bottom third. Yeah. What's up with that? Yeah. And we knew why they were in the bottom third, and great, please come ask us. That's the conclusion that we came to. Okay. We were afraid that, there would be a negative response. And then we were like, do you know what? Actually, that's the best thing that could happen is if someone questions that, because then that opens up an opportunity to have a really honest conversation about their performance and about their potential. And so I think that's the way we sort of have pushed ourselves to be boldly honest, is to say, do you know what? Actually, there's benefit in the questions that are going to come out of this, because it opens up really honest conversations with people.
Yeah. It really struck me when Helena said, in key moments of pressure, the thing we turn to as a management team is honesty. She goes on to make a useful distinction between, one, her fear of sharing the truth because it's scary to think about what the response is going to be, and two, remembering that it's uncertainty itself that actually makes us more afraid. And in the void of no information, people will create their own information anyway. By being brave and sharing the options, she and her team invite responses and a conversation. As she says, by sharing our options, we shift a level of control back to everyone, in order to reframe the fact that this pressure is something that we're all going through together. She shares here some bold, practical ways her organisation has decided to reduce the pressure of uncertainty through the principle of no secrets. Firstly, by saying to the organisation, if this happens, we're going to do this, and if that happens, our response is going to be that. And secondly, by pushing ourselves to be boldly honest and transparent about compensation. And as she said, that's a tough thing to do, but the right thing to do. And if someone has questions, they can come and have a really honest conversation. We crave certainty, and when we find it hard to predict, we waste our energy. We use up precious personal resource to process our experiences. I'm reminded of something that Paula McKenzie said in an earlier episode: make the implicit explicit. This feels important in what Helena is sharing here too. In pressure moments, what Paula and now Helena are reminding us is that the perception of certainty can be increased by being boldly transparent. How does pressure turn up for you now then, Helena?
Yeah. I mean, I still have a lot of bad habits. I don't recognize it as it's starting to build up all the time. And so I'll become terse accidentally because I'm like, I've got so much going on right now. I'm just going to answer this, there's 650 people that work at the company, so it's like, I'm getting, Slack messages and emails and texts. And then, my kids are working and there's too much happening at that moment. And so I see in retrospect myself becoming terse, not on purpose, but because I'm trying to speed through so many things.
Right.
And so what I need to become better at, and I'm trying to do, but I still have a lot of work to do on this, is to say, hey, everybody, just so you know, I'm feeling mega stressed today. Mm-hmm. So if I'm not as attentive as I want to be, I hope that you'll forgive me. Again, it's that sort of like, let's just be honest about what's going on here. But I do find it sneaking up on me. And then it's not until I'm like well in it that I'm like, oh, I'm really stressed out right now. But I would say those moments are further apart than they used to be. I try to be really good about reaching out to other people to say, I'm in the soup. Can you help me out? And giving myself permission to seek advice and support from other people so that I don't get
that's
to that
unusual. Has that been unusual for you? So when you feel it in the past, presumably you thought I can deal with that. And now you're saying
absolutely.
One of the ways to deal with that is to reach out and ask for help. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And I think it's because of this whole, like, my shame cycle early in my career where I felt I had to do everything myself. Mm-hmm. And that is a very difficult habit to break. And when I feel other people are stressed out and busy, I'm so much less. Then I'm like, I'll just do it. And I find myself doing that. And I'm like, don't do this. Because in part, especially in the role I'm in today, if I bring somebody else in on a project, it's growth for them. And I am still in this mind frame sometimes of like, don't be a burden, like just be really good and be quiet about it. And like, but when I do that, I limit opportunity for other people. And so what I assume is going to be a burden for them, I have to remind myself that actually it's an opportunity, but I give them permission, of course, to say, no, I can't do that right now because I'm too busy. But oftentimes people are like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'd love to do that with you. And, that I think is, I don't know, that is such a bad habit that I have, but I really am trying to be more focused on the second half of that, which is like creating opportunity for people as part of what I want to do.
Well, it sounds like that's your strategy, actually. The minute you start hearing yourself think, the burden turns into opportunity. It sounds like something you recognize, you can hear yourself saying, and then you shift it.
Yes.
When we had this briefing conversation, Helena, you shared a moment in bed.
Yes.
Can you just talk us through that? Because that really remained with me since our conversation, and I recognized it, and I'm sure many people recognize this moment, but it felt like it was quite significant.
Yes. So we, the last 3 years have been such an interesting journey. It really started with me having the opportunity to merge two companies together to create a new company, which is now Archetype.
Yep.
But I'll tell you what, I did not know enough about change management. I knew it was going to be hard. I didn't quite understand how challenging it was going to be to try to bring two cultures together. The two companies did the same thing. They created the same product in the world, which is communications and marketing strategies. And so you would think on the surface, of course, just put them together, but the cultures were so different. And so when I came in, one of the companies was the one that I already ran. And then the second company that we brought in was, 5 times the size of the one that I brought in, and had a very specific culture that had been in place for many, many years. And so when I came in there, they were like, who is this woman? And who does she think she is, trying to change everything? And they were coming from a place of uncertainty and doubt. Right. And I think when people go to their place of fear, sometimes the response is not as thoughtful as it might be when they're feeling confident and comfortable. As it's that sort of animal brain response. And so what happened for me personally is that in trying to assure people who were coming from a place of fear that I was someone that could be trusted was really challenging. And it became very personal for them. We have a tool that we use for to see how our employees are feeling, and it gives them an opportunity to give anonymous feedback, which I think is in many ways wonderful. But as also when things are anonymous, I think it gives people permission to be unkind in a way that they wouldn't be maybe to your face. There's benefit in that, right?
Yeah.
But the attacks became really personal, and it was the first time in my career where I felt like hated by some people, and they just would say truly awful things, and not all of them, just a few. But boy, those of course were the comments I remembered. I don't remember the people being like, she seems really lovely, I like her ideas. I don't remember anything like that. There probably were some of those too, but I remember the ones that that were really negative. And I was working late at night, sitting in bed with my laptop on my lap, which we can have a whole other conversation about how unwise that is.
Yes, Helena.
And I read one of these brutal comments, and I started to sob, because I was under all this pressure, right? I wanted all these people to know that like the path that we were going to forge was going to be so wonderful, and there'll be so much opportunity in it, and I was so excited for them and for me, because we were going to do so much together. But boy, I read that comment and I started to bawl, crying, like snot running down your face, sort of ugly crying. And my husband was in bed next to me, reading or whatever he was doing. And he was like, what is going on? And I was like, I can't do it. This is too hard. It feels so personal. And I was just apoplectic. And he was like, and I felt trapped, because we were just starting this transition, and how could I stop now? But he turned to me and he was like, just quit. And I was like, I am not going to quit. Like, who do you think you're talking to? And like, all of a sudden it was like, boom, I was like, absolutely not. Like, we're going to do this and it's going to be amazing. But it was just, I think it was
I love that.
Even him just giving me the permission to just bail made me want to double down. I'm like, I am not a person who bails. I am a person who like strives and we're going to do this. And it was a release for me, but and I tell people this story a lot inside the company too, so that they understand, like, I know it was hard. It was hard for me too. Yeah. And I think in the face of adversity, sometimes you just need to have a minute to be like, this is really hard, and have someone else be like, it sure is. And then if you get that, then you can carry on.
Gosh, yes. I really love that. That sort of sense of giving yourself permission to feel the pain, and the literal pressure that sort of exploded out of your eyes, and then to have someone recognize it and give you a way out.
Yes.
Sometimes you just need that to be acknowledged, don't you?
Exactly.
And then you can think, okay, right, I've let that release out, and now I'm going to find a way through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that was, how many years ago was that? 3, did you say?
3. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
3.
And you've not had moments like that in quite the same way to that extent since?
No, it was like, I almost needed to get that out of the way. And then it was like looking forward, from that moment on, it was like eyes forward, and we have a lot to do, and we've got to dig in and do it. And it feels so different today than it did 3 years ago. And I think because we've built this culture of trust and transparency, and we have lived up to that every step of the way, people can see the vision very clearly, and they understand. We share a lot more than a lot of companies do with our staff in terms of our goals and, and our strategy, and also our kind of backward looking measure of success, which is our financial results. We share that information. And so people can, we've lived up to the promise of building a culture of trust and transparency. So now we have trust. And to me, I think this has been the best lesson as a leader in the last 3 years for me, is this idea of trust. And that it's really about having trust with the people around you. And people never say, it's the best job I ever had, but God, I hated all the people, right? It's the best job you've ever had because you love the people around you. And the reason that you love the people around you is because you trust them and they trust you. And I think that is the difference for in terms of job satisfaction. That is the difference. Feeling trust and feeling trusted. And so we do a lot to make sure that is happening both ways, right? That we're being very transparent with people so that they can trust us. And then we're showing them, we trust you. We're going to give you opportunity. We're going to listen to everything that you have to say and take that into account as we're building our plans. And that's been a real difference maker in the culture.
Yeah. I hear that. And also I'm hearing that, the trust, because you often hear people talk a lot about the importance of trust, but how you're describing it there is that trust is an output of some action.
Yes.
So trust gets built through action. Trust doesn't sit on a wall of values on its own without actually being quite brave, because what you've done as a leadership team seems like it's very brave. And you've been consistent with it. That's what I'm hearing, which then builds that level of transparency and trust back. Yeah. That's what I'm hearing from your story.
Yes, I think that's right. And we think a lot about our number one objective when we launched the company. We did OKRs, and the very first one was build a culture of trust and transparency. And then hanging underneath that were all the very specific actions that we were going to take in order to build that. Now we don't need that as an OKR anymore, because it just exists.
Wow. Thank you. That's so good to hear. And I'd like to take you into your personal life. You referred to the fact that you've got twins, and also your mother's now living with you. Yeah. And sometimes when I have these conversations, and also linking back to the fact that you said it's not, that phrase work-life balance is actually about life. And that's what the pandemic's really taught us, that these two things are intertwined and they have different shapes depending on the individual.
Yes.
Your mother's now living with you.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, how does that play into personal pressure for you?
Yeah. Boy, this one's been really hard. I think you hear a lot about sort of the sandwich generation, right? People who are still raising their children, but then beginning to care for their parents. And you hear about it as this sort of concept, but it's not until you're in it that you really understand how hard it is. And even though I'm in my flow in my job. And so thank goodness for that, because I'm out of my flow a little bit in my personal life, if that makes sense. Yeah, so it's good to have the balance. It's good to have the balance. So my father passed away a couple of months ago, which was of course really sad and hard, but for no one more than my mom. They were very, very close, and had the world's greatest love story. And it was really beautiful to see. They adored each other until the last second. But my mom, unfortunately, has Alzheimer's, and I think my father's death sort of it leapfrogged forward a little bit, her struggling with her memory. And I shared with you, Sarah, I think it is a little bit like having I'm not trying to be insulting in any way, but the experience of trying to parent your parent who has Alzheimer's is a little bit like the experience of trying to parent your toddlers. There are moments that are so beautiful, and then moments that are so frustrating, and hard. But the biggest difference is when you're parenting toddlers, and I had two of them at the same time, you are just anticipating such wonderful things for them. Yeah. And you know that it gets easier over time, while you're running around making sure no one's, pulling, a plant off of the counter or touching the stove, right? As you're doing all of that protection, it's going to get better. And you're so looking forward to who they'll become. when you have a parent that you're caring for who has Alzheimer's, there's still that don't touch the stove, please don't open the door. But the anticipation is the opposite, because you know it's going to deteriorate. That is the disease. It gets worse over time. And I think that's the hardest part, is that you're doing your best and wanting to make sure that this person feels comfortable and loved, and you're watching them move further away. And it's really hard.
I'm sure. And how do you stay, what's the word? How do you exist in that?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, because we were talking about it a few minutes ago, about this idea of sort of calling upon others, which I'm trying to do more in my career. And I'm also trying to do more in my personal life. I still have some work to do on that as well. But, I'm so grateful to my husband. He is not here right now, so can't hear me say these things, so they must be true. He has been absolutely amazing throughout this experience. And, he takes her for lunch if I have a meeting that I need to do, or he just has been incredibly patient with her, and never for a moment made me feel like it was a burden that she was here in our house, and had sort of changed our lifestyle. And what a gift. And I'm so lucky. And I look, if I had one piece of advice to anybody, I would say find a partner who supports you unequivocally. And that is what Stuart, my husband, has done for me. It's why I have the career I have. It's why I have the life I have. He has believed in me and supported me without question. And that has been the thing that has saved me. But I've also found that, like, right now, if I call on someone for help and they don't show up the way that I need them to, it is like crushing for me, because I feel so desperate, and I feel afraid, and I need to talk to my friends about it, or I need to ask my brother to do something. And when people let me down without intending to, it crushes me right now. So this is, I think, going to be the next phase for me to become more resilient in that way. Because for me, it's hard to ask for help. And so when I do ask for help and I don't get it, then I'm like, what am I doing? I just need to build that resilience a little bit around that topic. But I think it's the only way to get through something like this, is to call on the love and support of other people.
As someone who also finds it hard to ask for help, I think what Helena is describing here is so vital. Having a support network that works for you, be that a group of friends that you can rely on, or a partner like Stuart. Having those people in your life who can ease the strain and be there to help and support you when you need it most. The thing is, we have to be bold and ask, and know what kind of support we're actually asking for. So here's to all of us being braver and asking for what we need in order to ease the pressure. And here's to all of us perhaps being surprised at how gladly people will be there. First of all, I am so grateful that with your honesty in this conversation, Helena, because I think, there are so many people, and I have individual conversations with different people and different leaders particularly, and they share all sorts of bits that make up their lives and press their pressure points. Yeah. And it happens in a room with two people. And, I think these are important conversations. It's the reality that we're all living in different ways, and pressure shows up in different ways, and people's way of managing it is constantly evolving. I know it is for me. And, what you've just shared today with me is that journey, which goes on. And before we head to the questions that I always ask, I just have something else that I'd really like to discuss with you around pretense. So people who know me know that there's sometimes I think you do have to act as if, in order to persuade yourself that you can do it. Or that's how I've interpreted it in my life, is that part of a pressure situation is just to, come on, you may not be 110% able to do this, but just give it a go and pretend that you're this. Just pretend like. And I learned this hugely when I was teaching. I didn't have an opportunity to say to 14-year-olds that I was fearing the lesson,
Yes.
or that I actually didn't know what to do with that kid who really wasn't listening to anything that I said. And, if I had been truly open and authentic and transparent in that moment, I would like to have said that. But I couldn't have done. And actually, if I had done, that wouldn't have been helpful to them.
Yes.
So what do you think? I'm so impressed with your journey of openness and true authenticity and the way that it's really helped you manage that secret weight that's placed on you in terms of pressure. How do you now deal with that other bit?
Yeah, I mean, what a fascinating question. So thank you for asking it. I mean, we are in the business of consulting clients and giving them advice, and part of that means giving them confidence. And so that requires us to show up in a way with a lot of confidence so that they can believe that we're going to get through this together. When a company is in crisis, the worst thing for us to do as consultants is to look at all like we're fazed by it.
Yeah.
We got to be cool as a cucumber, even if we've never gone through this experience before, because that is part of what we were being paid for, to help calm other people down and give them a sense of confidence because they see that we have it. So I think there's a difference between being inauthentic and being more confident in a moment than you have the right to be. I think those are two different things. I think you can, I want people to show up as their most authentic selves.
Yeah.
But I think you also, it's almost back to that two-way trust thing, right? You cannot be so yourself in that moment that you are eroding trust with the other person. And there's a lot of sort of fake it till you make it that has to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very different than being an authentic leader.
Yes.
An authentic leader who brings their full self every day and gives other people permission to be themselves. That to me, somehow, I don't know, is different. I think you have to sometimes pretend you're more confident than you are, which to me is not necessarily the same thing. And maybe that sounds strange to people, but I do think because what you're doing in that moment is lifting that other person up and helping them to be okay. And we do fake it till you make it for sure. Like we'll get asked to do something that we've never done before. Underpinning that has to be confidence that, we'll probably be able to do this. We've never done it before, but we're going to give it our best effort. That has to be underneath that.
I think that's true. And I think from my experience working, for 13 years as a teacher, I saw evidence of the fact that young people, you would push them to something that was quite uncomfortable with their, and they would suddenly wake up and think, oh my God, I can do that.
That is growth. That is what growth feels like.
And had they not, so I think confidence can be an output of actually pretending that you are this. And suddenly you wake up to thinking, oh, I'm bigger than I thought, or I'm more capable than I thought.
Yeah. I think borrowing confidence is different than being inauthentic.
That's a lovely distinction. Borrowing confidence. I love that. Yes.
Because you have to push yourself and you have to be willing to take a chance in order to grow. I remember when I got the job offer, my first CEO job offer, and I was like, what, are they crazy? Like, what are they talking about? And I had butterflies. Every time I thought about it, I would get that feeling inside of me of like, oh boy. And I was like, lean into that. When you have butterflies, it means you are about to grow because you're going to be challenged in a way that you haven't been before. So I think that I would lean into that feeling of like, I'm going to pretend I'm more confident about this than I really am because I know that there's a really good possibility that I can do it. And if I can't, then I'm going to be honest about it as I go through the experience. And when I took the first CEO job that I took, where I really was like, well, I mean, we all have the, well, I shouldn't say we all, many people have imposter syndrome when they've taken a new role. Right. And I think that's okay. I think you have to be a little bit honest inside there and tell people I'm nervous about this or or whatever. But you have to read the room, right? I don't want to be nervous when I am presenting to a client going through a crisis, what we believe that they should do. And because I'm really telling them authentically, this is what I think that you should do. So it's not like I'm misleading them. The only thing I'm doing is being cool as a cucumber when I do it, because I think it's the best shot that we have at success. Is it guaranteed? No, absolutely not. So I think that, again, this is, I think, the difference between the two, and the sort of borrowing confidence concept that I just mentioned, which I just made up. But I think it's that. It's like, I think this is really, I believe that this is the best path forward. I think is different than, like, you're not purposely misleading anybody in that moment. You're just you're presenting from a place of confidence.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a really helpful distinction. And gosh, I could talk about that for a lot longer. Anyway, Helena, there are two questions, or there's a question that I ask each time, which is, if you were to pay forward two pieces of, like, nuggets of gold for people who are thinking, how can I be better under pressure? What two things would you pay forward? What would be the first thing?
Oh gosh. So I think being really clear on your purpose, I think, is the most important thing that you can do as you move through your career into senior leadership positions. Being very clear, and when I say your purpose, it's the mark that you want to leave in the world. That is the thing that energizes you the most. Okay. We talked about this sort of energy in, energy out, the fuel tank concept earlier. Being really clear on, like, the thing that is most meaningful to you in order to give you that energy to keep going, which for me is helping people to feel more confident in their work and in their lives. So I am now crystal clear on that. And that helps me to maintain energy, so that when things are really stressful, I almost, I'll try to schedule my time so that there's at least something in the day where it's me talking to somebody, who wants help with something, or telling them about this new opportunity, or it's something that is that me giving them that opportunity for growth. And so in high pressure moments, I want to make sure that I have a little bit of that in my day. Now, that's not the same. Not everyone's going to derive their energy from that same source. It happens to be mine. But I think just getting really clear on what that is, that would be for in terms of my leadership, it has been the thing that has helped me the most and helps keep me going when we're in very high pressure moments.
So for you, it's actually connecting with other people and helping them to be better.
Yeah, or helping them to feel more successful. Which doesn't mean necessarily that they are more successful. It's just now they can see it more clearly. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's that sense, feeling inside of you, like, oh, this feels good. I feel successful. I want that for other people.
Great. And so, what I love about what you're just saying is you need to have that in the diary. You need to know where those moments are. Yes. Whereas maybe somebody else might say, actually, I need separation, or I need to be on my own, or I need to go for a walk or whatever. And what you're saying is, actually, I need to have the fuel of somebody else's energy feeling better as a result of our conversation.
Totally. And, the other thing that I would say is, when you are leading an organization, you spend so much of your time in decision-making about things big and small. Anything significant that is happening, I have to say yes or no to. And sometimes those decisions feel higher pressure than others, but there is pressure inside the constant decision-making. Yeah. And that I can't turn to somebody else and say, you decide on this one. I mean, I do that, of course, for my team. I'm like, I'm going to leave this one with you guys, because I trust that you're going to know the right answer. But there is so much big and small decisions that have to be made. And so I have a Peloton, which I got my Peloton pretty early on in the pandemic. And it is the one time in a day where I don't need to make a single decision. Somebody else is telling me what to do. And there's something so bizarrely relaxing about someone saying, now do this, now do this. And it's like, I can turn it off and just be like, and just go into this execution mode where I'm doing someone else's bidding. I know that sounds bizarre, but
oh my God, it makes complete sense. Totally.
And then you're done and you're like, oh my God, that was the best thing I've ever done. And why don't I should be riding the Peloton 7 hours a day? And like and then of course you don't, but you have to make, time to do that. And I need to be better about that, carving out the time to do it, because when I do it, it is not only do you feel great because all of the endorphins and all of that, but it is just this moment of like, I don't have to decide anything. Someone else is going to tell me what to do. And it feels really good. I wouldn't want that all day long every day, but like in those little pockets, it is actually amazing because you can kind of unplug from that part of like, I am responsible for all of the things.
Gosh,
it's the one time of day that I'm not responsible.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I can so relate to that. I mean, I have a very mini experience of that, just doing couch to 5K.
Yes.
Because I mean, just knowing, right, now you stop, now you walk, now you run, now you take a break. It's just, it is freeing, isn't it? It's liberating.
It is freeing. It is freeing. And nobody else is waiting on you. No one else is looking at how you're performing in that moment. It's like, you're just going to do what someone else is telling you to do and feel good about it. And guess what? If you're not good at doing what they're telling you to do, that's okay. You know what I mean? You're not going to let anybody down in that moment. It's amazing.
Love that. Helena, thank you so much. What a rich conversation. So many little things I'd love to pick up and have more discussion on. But I really appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was an absolute delight, as always, to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Better Under Pressure with me, Sarah Milne-Rowe. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe and let us know what you found useful or what you'd like to know more about. Our aim is to share as many examples as possible of what people do to manage pressure for better. If you're interested in any of the practices mentioned, check out my book, The Shed Method. Alternatively, you can find us at Coaching Impact or me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Better Under Pressure was produced by the fab team at Smart Cookie Media. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.